welcome. Glad to see so many eager faces here. Education is the biggest racing safety problem we have. We know how to protect drivers. Drivers don't know that they need it. And hopefully from this presentation you'll see why any racer needs the protection. Don's covered my background a bit. I'm an engineer, but I've worked with doctors for over 40 years trying to understand how the body is injured and minimize injuries. Injuries, when they occur, their treatment is a medical problem. But how they got created is actually an engineering problem. It's a failure of tissue. And that's been my main research topic for all these years. In '92, I got the chance to be the research manager in the program. Don talked about, we're the guys that put the black boxes in race cars. We put them in Indy cars after we did a bit of analysis and realized that these are very severe crashes. We investigated using those boxes over the first few years of the program, 600 crashes. And we learned a lot, and that's how we know to protect drivers in other situations. We've published all of this research so that other people can understand it and make advancements on it. I am independent. I have no connection with any or arrangement with any safety equipment manufacturer. So I feel that I can give unbiased advice to anybody, a manufacturer or driver or sanctioning body. Now, I want to inform you on what we have learned so that you can improve your protection. We're going to do that by looking at what we learned from IndyCar crashes, show you what really happens in a crash, and tell you how we took the IndyCar crash information and the research we did there and applied it to the terrible problem that NASCAR had in 2000 and 2001, and now it's the safest racing going. And we'll show you test data that demonstrates that you can achieve this kind of protection in any racing car. Now, Indy cars, when we got into the business of looking at them, had the following driver protection features: 6-point harnesses. That's rule number one. 5-point harnesses aren't good. Okay, you'll hear this over and over. 6-point harnesses are the way to go. They had effective head impact padding, and because the seat is the tub, essentially, in those cars, so narrow, there's a little bit of padding maybe between you and the chassis. It is a really strong support of your body, particularly laterally, and that's the key to survival in side impacts. So we got all of this information from actual crashes with real people from the crash recording. We've done a lot of testing to simulate that, and as I indicated, the NASCAR National Series is the best example of how we took these principles and applied them to a situation in which drivers were dying, getting severely hurt, and it basically minimized their injury to the point of a few concussions and occasional flailing injury. What works to protect you? The first thing is your car structure. That really gives you a space to survive in. If that space is compromised, it comes in on you, you're no longer protected, and there's not a lot we can do to protect you. Stuff comes in and gets you. So having a strong chassis is roll cage and such is really important for your survival space. The problem is those structures, when you hit something, produce very high G loads on your body, and that has to be resisted by what you have inside the car to take advantage of the structure. Now, what is a racing crash like? Well, a lot of people say, well, you know, those guys that crash at Talladega, they're going 200 miles an hour, or they're going 230 at Indy. Those are really bad crashes, but you know, I run short track. I'm only running 60, 70 miles an hour on the straightaway. I can't crash hard. Baloney. High-speed ovals aren't where you have the hard and severe crashes. It's short tracks that you do. In fact, and I'll explain this in a minute, the worst velocity change, that's how we judge how severe a crash is in many ways, we've seen in an IndyCar crash or a stock car crash is about 70 miles an hour. You can't run straight to the wall on a super straight speedway. you're running along it. On a short track, you can turn 90 degrees and find the wall real fast straight ahead. A rule of thumb is if you can go 40 miles an hour in a race car and you're wearing double shoulder belts, you can die if you don't have a head and neck restrictor if you find a wall. 40 miles an hour, that's all it takes. You look at Mr. Earnhardt's crash. That was a very minor looking crash, but we all know the outcome. Here's the deal. Engineers talk about the center of gravity of the car and its motion. That yellow vector is the actual speed of the car, center of gravity. Now it's going towards the wall at 60 miles an hour and along it at 180. The crash velocity is the speed into the wall because the wall isn't going to stop you as you go along it. Here's an example of that. That's Jeff Andretti 92. That was our second crash that we investigated. And I'm sure the commentator said he went straight into the wall. It looked like it, didn't it? Well, that's what these long lenses do when that happens. Here's another view of it. You'd swear he's going straight into the wall, isn't he? He is pointed at the wall, but notice that he's coming down the track not a lot slower than the other guys. We simulated that. So this is an animation, really. There's a reason we do this, you'll see in a second. So we made it look just like those films, right? Now, because we have the animation, we can look at it in any direction. And you will see here that there's the line of the motion of the car. It was a straight line when he lost the wheel, right to the wall, at an angle. He didn't go straight into the wall, he was going along it. The wheel came off, that yellow vector is the direction of the car's motion, and that's the actual crash. It was what going into the wall again. Here's a helicopter view. We can look at any view once we've animated it. And this, you get the feeling, this is a swiping motion. It's just that the motion towards the wall got stopped, and that's the crash. Now his feet were horribly smashed in that crash, as was Nelson Piquet's. Those were our first two crashes in our program. We helped solve that problem right away, but we said, they were averaging 55 Gs in those crashes. Here's the speed into the wall there, 63 miles an hour, 179 along. Okay, so the crash speed is that one into the wall. That's why we put crash recorders in, is because they averaged 55 Gs in the crash. Wonder what the peak was. Well, you can't find that from video, but you can from a crash recorder. New cars have this high level of protection, particularly inside and rear impacts. They still get hurt in frontal impacts sometimes, and Terry Trammell's been working on that for years. The goal is my solution is to get the drivers to sit up more, but they don't want to do that. They like to lay down when they race. In our investigation, the side impacts really got our attention. This is peak Gs versus just case number. Notice how many of there are above 60 Gs, all the way up over 120 Gs sideways, and yet nobody got seriously hurt in those crashes. That was real news to us. This is a severe side impact crash. That driver, Scott Goodyear, was knocked out and did have I think an ankle fracture. But he came back next year and won that race. Car bottomed out because the tires were up to temp, and he lost downforce. That's real time, the violence of it.
That was his second spine fracture.
Pardon me?
That was spine fracture number 2 for Goodyear on that crash.
Oh, he had a spine fracture in that?
Just a little.
A little bit. Okay. So you saw it. Okay. But he did come back.
Right at 3 months.
Yeah. Here's the crash recording from that crash. The first part of the hit, when you hit the corner, when you lost it, was 80 Gs, and then the main pulse, 135 Gs, and a speed change of 60 miles per hour. We just couldn't believe people could take that, particularly sideways. This is why. One, good head support, good pelvic support. Seats have always had that, right? It's the shoulder support that saved him from chest injuries, okay? And that is the new thing we learned from the Indy cars. You've got to support the shoulder in a seat to protect people. If you don't do that, they will get chest injuries and neck injuries, all sorts of things. We Our rule of thumb is we can protect the driver to 100 Gs without severe injury with the factors that we know now. 6-point belts, good body support, head padding, and control of head motion. We'll talk about head and neck restraints later. Okay, seats are probably the one piece of racing safety that everybody ignored. You just wanted a comfortable seat because that's all I care. It holds me up in the corners, fine. They didn't realize how important the seat is inside impact in particular, and in all impacts. When you buckle your belts up, you're pulling yourself into the seat. So it's the other half of your belt restraint system. You gotta remember that. That has to stay there throughout the crash, or your belts are gonna go loose. And most racing crashes aren't a single hit. They're bang, boom, bang, you know, and then a flip. If your belts are loose now because your seat deformed, you're in trouble for those extra hits. So the seat has to stay there. And again, it's the pelvis, the shoulder, and the head. A lot of guys like rib support seats for cornering and driving. They're a potential injury source. We don't like them. If you want them, we'll talk about that. They ought to be as flimsy as possible, just to hold you up in the corners, and straight, not curved. Farrell Roberts had the right idea in 1964. Look, he's got shoulder support and pelvic support. I can't believe it. He was just doing that to stay up in the car because they ran production car seats back then, and there was no side support back in 64. It has to stay in place in front of crashes for belt performance. Got to get that total body support. Virtually all seats used in racing, except for NASCAR, do not provide this. Here's Arie Luyendyk in an IROC crash. You can see where his head is. I took this picture. He had a racing seat, a classic aluminum racing seat back in that crash. Look at the head restraint part of it, bent right over. Gone. Okay? He didn't get any protection from that. Here's our classic poster boy. This is Johnny Benson. Now watch this. He's got head support, shoulder support, rib support, traditional aluminum racing seat. You can see him sort of moving around. The parts moving actually in the motion of the crash. He leans away from the wall. Don't do that. Look at the way those things bend. His goggles went out the window if you saw that. He was wearing those. Okay? But seat manufacturers said, well, yeah, but that bending out of the way absorbs energy. A little tiny bit. It didn't stay there for him. Now, he didn't have any further action down the track, so he was okay. He actually didn't get hurt in that. Now, head and neck restraints are the only thing we know to prevent this basal skull fracture problem, but none of them work sideways. Regardless what manufacturers may say, none of them work sideways. Your seat is your protection against basal skull fracture in side impact crashes, and you need the head and the shoulders to have them. Give it to you. Here's J.D. McDuffie from Watkins Glen. Right side impact, heavy. He's dead right about here. He just bled out from a basal skull fracture. Terrible injury. And that's what happens when the base of your skull is fractured. Cuts the blood vessels go into your brain, and you bleed to death immediately. But we need to do that. The IndyCar body support areas are the long head pad, shoulder, and such. The pelvis, because of the weight of the car is for protection. But most race drivers don't sit like that. They sit more upright, their arms are bent. Most seats are an independent structure that you buy and put in the car. They're not built in like in an Indy car. And most of them have minimal lateral torso and head support. And the seat is up to the driver to buy, so it's your choice as to how you're going to protect yourself. Now, based on what we learned in IndyCar, we now have a standard for the padding for any seat, SFI 45.2. We have a standard for the seats now, just recently in the last couple of years, to guarantee you've got a strong seat to perform like an IndyCar. We now have aluminum and carbon fiber composite seats available. I want to mention interior nets because they also can help with this particular problem. Now, in the more upright seating situation, these supports are, as shown there. Those are the critical areas. Here's the Hendrick SFI 39.1, which is the NASCAR standard seat. Very strong seat, but it's not cheap. Here's the side impact test at 70 Gs with that seat. No big deal. Okay, held it in place, absorbs the energy. There it goes. Here's a LaJoy 39.1 seat, an aluminum seat. These seats are probably around $3,000 or $4,000. The Hendrick seat, that's pretty pricey. ISP has one. Notice all the supports there. About the same price range. Kirky has one. It's a 39.1. It's $2,500. And there is a second SFI standard that is not as not as strong in terms of the forces, but it still has a very high forces. This is a $1,500 seat that meets that standard and would protect many drivers. The features are the shoulder supports and rib supports should be straight up and down and point straight forward. A lot of seats have curved, angled pieces for your shoulders. Don't want to do that. It prevents shoulders and chest injury. Here's how you fracture a clavicle. You see how he was tackled with his arm pulled forward? If your seat pushes your shoulder forward in the side impact, you'll break your clavicle. If it's held back straight in the corner, it won't break. Road racing seats. The FIA standard seats, the 1999 standard, is what a lot of seats are in road racing. By law, FIA law, you can't attach the seat upper structure to the roll cage. It's ridiculous, but that's what they require. You gotta hold it to the full ground. So you're giving up support right there. Their sled test is a 15G sled test. 15 Gs is racing, that's rubbing fenders practically. Now, you saw this a little bit before. This is an FIA seat in a side impact. Not much of a side impact, as you'll see in this next view. That's it. Driver died. Seat broke, basal skull fracture. That is just not proper. Most sports car racing seats do not have all this proper shoulder support. FIA does have a new standard for stronger seats, but they're very expensive, and I don't know that they really have required and implemented them in FIA level things. There are only, to my knowledge, 3 available seats for road racing that have this feature. Racetech Dodge Viper Competition Coupe seat, which is about a $2,500 seat. Very nice composite seat. I helped Chrysler develop that for the Dodge Viper, and it's been tested to 45 Gs. It does need a triangular net to give the support, but it does have the right features. Randy LaJoy is making a road race seat. A lot of road racers don't, they want carbon. I've advised Randy to paint it black. He actually had a guy that made it look like carbon, but the guy went out of business, so I'm not doing that anymore. And now Kirky has a road racing seat that meets the SFI standards too, so you can get a good seat. That's about a $1,500 seat. Okay, now, how does this all work? Drivers are actually just as hard or harder. The difference is we're not getting into serious injuries anymore. It's the seats and the restraint systems that are the primary reason for that. Here's a classic example, Erin Crocker. Heavy right-hand side impact, and then she gets T-boned. Watch this. You can see it slam down, and boom. She gets hit. Here she is, got a good aluminum seat, supported with a net. First hit, about 50 Gs probably. Second hit, 50 Gs the other way. She's fine. She's pissed. And here's something just about getting out of the car. I'll leave this on just for a minute. She's getting ready to get out. Radio connector. Well, it had been slipping on them, so they taped it. You can't get silver tape off with gloves. She can't. Now, if there had been a fire, she would have gotten out. We noticed that. You see the radio cables going with the drivers when they get out if there's a fire. Okay, she was very upset about that thing too. Okay, we had J.D. McDuffie. Watch Jeff Fuller. It's just, you just hate to see that. I mean, he found a spot on the track that was perfectly awful. Now that's every bit as severe as J.D. McDuffie's crash, or worse, and yet he was okay. He did have, it was 120 Gs, 70-mile-an-hour velocity change. No serious head neck injuries. He might have been knocked out, they're not sure. He had some flailing injuries of the extremities, which you might expect, and certainly that was more severe than that. And that was a seat that wasn't yet up to the SFI standards. It was a stronger seat, but it wasn't up. This happened before the standards got put in place. Okay, so what about this interior net? You got this good seat now. Do you really need the interior net? Well, yeah. Not all side impacts are pure lateral, and you might get hit sideways after you've had a frontal impact. You may be way out of your seat. In Indy cars, that wasn't a problem because the support area goes all the way up to the steering wheel. A net can produce that same kind of protection for you. This is a safer barrier test in Nebraska. It's a 20-degree impact to the wall. It's got the Thor dummy, which is a very advanced dummy. You'll see a little more of that later. It's got a Hans on, LaJoy seat, Simpson net, 140 miles per hour, 80 mile per hour velocity change, 50 G peak diesel as he hits the safer barrier. Safer barrier is a wonderful device. See it deform there? It's not protecting the car here, it's protecting the driver by lowering the G's. But it's what we do inside that is safer. The safer barrier alone would not have stopped those injuries that have been occurring. See, here's the net. Now watch. It caught him from going around the head restraint. Now, that's not as far forward as some of the head restraints are now. Okay? Now, they made this car roll because they were looking at the rooftop hatch. See that up there above him? Sort of opening. They wanted to see if it would pop open. So they made the car roll as it came off of the impact. So we're rolling now. And you'll see that we use the net again in a second. A lot of stuff going on when you roll under. You off-road guys know all about that. Yes.
Was that with the head neck restraint?
He had head neck restraint. Well, there's a lot of this. My rule of thumb is in a crash, the crash force is a big magnet, and you're an iron file, and you're going to get sucked towards the crash. You saw how it happened again. So the net is very useful in containing you. Now, they're very low cost, and they are effective inside impacts. They can make a cheap seat work. They have to be placed properly, though. If you place it too low, your head will go over it. If you put it too high, you're liable to get your head into it in a side impact and get compressed. You want it just so you can sort of see over it, and it's about running the top strap through your seat to your head, which is right about here. Mounting them, I noticed a lot of people that use them. One, you don't want a rigid mounting to the dash tube because the chassis can deform and it might unlatch at just the wrong time. But they run them in the wrong spot because, well, they can only attach it to that tube down there. No, you can use the skyhook. You can run strapping from the header tube to the dash tube and anchor it anywhere in space. And you'll see actually that in practice here in a second. You can mount it anywhere that way so you get it just right, because that's what you want. There's a mounting ready there. Simpson net, Safecraft, and one trick is to run them all the way around to the other side and catch them there. It makes it pull tight faster than if it was just run back. Wrap around, the seat works too. Now in rallying and off-road, the nets are useful for preventing driver-to-driver contacts. Because that is a source of injury in rallying, and I'm sure in off-road racing where there are two people. Here is a off-road seat by ISP, Innovative Seating Products. And it's got nets and it's special cushioning that Chris Van Gilder, the owner of that company, has developed for vertical. He's done a lot of work with the monster truck guys who really jump. Those big jumps they take, they were blowing through suspension seats and breaking their backs. And Chris has got a cushion that goes in his seat that has solved that problem very nicely for a lot of the drivers. And they really like it. Because they go out and intentionally do this stuff every time they show up. Okay, so low cost protection. What about price? Terry talked about price. You can have a low cost system. Here's a flimsy aluminum seat. Didn't do any good. The neck boats there would have been fatal. That's a side impact dummy that we're using. Okay? All we did is put a net on there. It works. Neck loads were significantly reduced. That's why you see those in SCCA, Grand Am, and other places. It was the only solution for the seats they were running. They don't have good seats. This helps. And they're cheap. Okay. Now, what happens to a race car driver in a crash? Well, you got these belts on, you can't move. Somebody mentioned talked about that motion. Well, there's the big magnet and the iron filing analogy right there. You wouldn't believe. There's very early, one of our first sled tests, we thought 45 Gs was really something in sled testing back in the 90s. When we started the race car stuff, we hadn't gotten big crashes recorded. They came a little later. So we're running an IndyCar setup. There it is, tightly attached. First thing that happens is everything moves straight forward. Your legs are a third of your body mass, so they're pulling you forward. Everything's moving forward. And until the pelvis stops, you're not going to load your shoulder belts. You're just going to go under your belts. Okay, that's why 5 points don't work. Okay, you got to stop the pelvis. 6 points, because the crotch belt's running back behind the driver, which is what IndyCar had, stops the pelvis. So now we just stop the pelvis. Now we go forward and stop the shoulders. That's when this deadly force occurs that breaks the base of your skull. It's the flick of your head at that point when the shoulder belts stop your shoulder. And by the time you get all the way forward, you don't have a head neck restraint on. You're maybe dead. Chest injuries were very common in stock cars with 5-point belts. Indy cars, your 6-point, we never saw a chest rib injury. Terry, I think we've still accepted some weird cases. We've not really seen a chest injury from the belt system in an Indy car to this day. Is that right? Terry? Chest injuries in Indy car drivers, we just really don't see them.
Yeah, I don't think we've had one in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't happen. And the difference is pelvic restraint. You got to stop the pelvis first, and then then you get your shoulders into the belt as a shoulder belt. If you wait with a 5-point and slide under it, this was happening with NASCAR drivers. Once it stops, you come up into your belts and it hits you right in the chest. Chest should never be loaded, and when it is, you break it up. You break clavicles, sternums, ribs. At 5-point. Now, if you ran the 5th point straight back, that would work. Ain't nobody going to do that. You know what's going to happen. Okay, the 6th point is the way to go. But in fact, and the Willans are the people that developed the very first one, and they run all the way back. If you notice there, they significantly reduce chest deflection in the test dummy, which is what we use to judge the threat of injury to the chest. It actually reduces the neck tensions a little bit, but not enough to save your life. Here is a plot of chest compression. The only difference in this test was a 5-point belt versus a 6-point. The green line with up to almost over 2 inches of deflection of the chest is with a 5-point. With a 6-point, it's less than an inch. Okay. Just every time we run that test, that's what we get. Very simple. Here is a 6-point formula style cam lock from Simpson. Here's one that we developed with them, and any manufacturer can make this. It's just made out of the bits and pieces from a the latchet link system, but it gives a similar arrangement to the belts for 6-point. For those of you that run on dirt, this is a good solution. It's called the DSL system. It's relatively inexpensive, but it does, and it can be made in a 7-point form, as I'll mention in a minute. Schroth has an interesting way to do the crotch belts. Rather than the formula style and anchoring them with the shoulder belts, it anchors with the lap belts. And that's a nice, very nice fitting piece too. Now, we like 7-point belts. We're emphasizing that in NASCAR now. That's the 6-point belt with the 5th-point back. Why do you do that? Well, when you run the 6-point belts under you, that means they're not going to hold you down very much if you roll. And that was one of the complaints about 6 points. Well, in an IndyCar, that's not a problem because they lay down and the lap belt is actually vertical. It's what holds your pelvis down. So we're going to put that 5th point back in there, so when you roll, it keeps you down in the cockpit. Turns out it makes tightening your belts easier too. You just pull them tight and you don't pull the belt system up over your pelvis into your gut like you do. That's one of the downsides of a 6-point, is you can pull it up into your gut if you don't have the crotch straps tight. That way the whole system stays tight because you're pulling against that 7-point. Don Taylor made these drawings years ago, and I still use them. He did a very nice job. There's a 7-point arrangement. And that's a Schroth system there, a hybrid system with the 7th point. Here's a test of the 7th-point system. When Denny Hamlin at Watkins Glen last year, things happened. Even to the best of us, they really sailed into the wall there, and as you'll see, we found a bad place to hit a wall. There's a tire barrier and an arm coat, but right behind it was a catch fin stanchion. So we got a concrete loader right in the middle. You can see what it did to the car. There, he had we didn't know it, he had a 7-point system. You can see the 7th point there sticking out in the front in this carbon seat. And he was fine. We use this to prove that that 7th point isn't going to hurt you. It's not like the old 5-point. You're not going to get to it because your crotch belts will hold your pelvis back and you won't squeeze anything hard in that situation. 9-point belts. Oh my God, this guy's going crazy. Well, it turns out a lot of now NASCAR drivers are using double shoulder belts. It came from Formula One. It was developed because the drivers were accelerating so hard, they were sliding up the seat. They wanted a belt that was anchored down lower, but if you anchor your belts low, then they don't work well in the frontal crash. So they started using 2 belts, one on the body, anchored low, and then the other one on top that goes over the Hans. And it turns out it makes the Hans work quicker, where the belts come together if it's right in front of the Hans. And so here's the arrangement. You'll see, see if I can make this thing work here. There we go. Yeah, you can see the top belt here, and the other one is under the body and mounted down low. And the 2 of them come together right down in here, right in front of the Hans. So as the driver goes forward, the Hans is trapped and it tightens up sooner, as you'll see here. That's a 70G SFI test. For rollover again, if that's something you're really concerned about, making that body belt and having it anchored like 30 degrees down for rolling, and then the other belt, which goes over the Hans, goes straight back. That's for crashing forward. Works very well. All your belts should be as short as possible and as straight a path as possible. Have good clearance through the seat. Move in a crash, and if the hole around your belts is right against the belt, it defeats the belt's ability to carry the tension. It can cause a failure. Make sure the hole of the seat has adequate clearance, particularly on the sides. The lap belt anchoring now, for years, every manufacturer had different specifications. We now have a uniform mounting guide from SFI that all the manufacturers have agreed to. So, thank goodness for those of you that are scrutineers protect people. Now, there's only one way to do the belts, not 40 different ideas. SFI 16.5 belts, they are the belts to use. 16.1 was the original standard. That's what all the 5-point belts, all the nylon belts are. 16.5 was developed at NASCAR's request. It's for polyester belts, and they have the same strength and stiffness, whether they're 2-inch or 3-inch, because most people don't have bodies that a 3-inch belt fits, particularly down in the pelvis. Nobody noticed that when we were nylon belts, because they bunch up right down there. But unless you're a really, really big guy or girl, your pelvis isn't that tall. And when you sit down, you get uncomfortable, because when they went to polyester, which is a stiffer belt material, the drivers were complaining, I'm all red down there, my belts are really bothering me. It's because the belts are too tall. 2-inch belts will fit you better, and fit is key to good protection. The pressures under the belts are equal. We proved that in research we did at Wayne State, and we think you get better performance from your system if it fits you tighter and has 2-inch belts. This is an eye chart in the way that the belt pressure, you'll see when we measured it under lap and shoulder 2 and 3, you only get about 2 inches of area of support, whether it's 3 or 2. You notice in the 3s how you get the edges are high pressure, but the center doesn't carry any pressure. That's why. You can't fit it on the body properly. Use 6 or 7 points, don't use 5 points. Use 2-inch if you can get them for best fit. SFI 16.5. It's got some other features that makes your belt better. And crotch belts should be anchored as far back as possible. Now, we just taken care of restraining your torso. Unfortunately, we didn't do anything for your head. And that is the modern race car problem. Here's a 15G human volunteer test run by the Navy. Watch what happens. That's 15 G's, guys and girls. You can't hold your head up above 8 G's. Race drivers say, oh, I got strong neck muscles. It's not going to hurt me. Here it is in real time. You can see the violence of the event. And these guys were trained. I mean, these guys have ridden the sled, and it was a contest to see who could hold their body up better, longer. But nobody got past 8 G's before they started doing that stuff. And so he knew it was coming. This is not an accident. Now, we all know what happened in 2000 and 2001 with those fatal crashes. They all had one very similar factor, and that is it was a right front side impact, right front corner. And what was happening is in stock cars where the driver has the steering wheel back like this, that was saving their lives from the crashes, from this deadly injury of basal skull fracture. Those crashes, they missed the steering wheel, and that's why they died. Earnhardt, Adam Petty, all of them. It was a right front corner hit. And they had basal skull fracture or a high cervical spine tension failure. And the estimated, since we didn't have crash occurrence in those cars, the estimated severity was on the order of 40 to 50 mile an hour velocity change and 40 to 70 BGs. Okay? So if you can go 40 miles an hour and find a wall, you can die if you've got your shoulder belts on, but you haven't got a head and neck restraint on. Here's that time when this injury occurs. And the reason your neck muscles don't help is because they will protect your neck, but all the forces go through the base of the skull, and that you have no control over. You don't know how thick your skull is. People have survived this. Ernie Irvin had a thick enough skull that he got a basal skull fracture and he didn't die from it. They got to it real quickly. I don't know how you stop the bleeding because you can't put a tourniquet around somebody's neck. That ain't gonna work. But they stopped it, and it must have been not a severe fracture because he must have had a pretty thick skull, which sort of imputes when they talked about Swerve and Irvin and the way he drove. But in any event, you can't be sure of what you got in terms of the base of your skull. Now, I guess you could do a CAT scan now and find out, but I think the answer is neck restraint. Okay. And a lot of people have been trying to do head and neck restraints. There's only one system to date that has proven to be effective. Real crashes up to 140 Gs. We have an IndyCar driver with a Hans on at 140 Gs front crash, no problem whatsoever. He broke his ankles, not because of intrusion like I showed you in the Jeff Andretti crash, but at 140 Gs, your legs are pretty heavy pushing on the pedals, and it broke his ankle. The crush did get to the pedals, but not beyond them. So that was his only injury. Hans, I talked to him after at the next race. He said his neck wasn't even sore after that crash. It's used worldwide, and it does have sliding tethers now, which makes it virtually invisible to the driver when he's turning his head. There it is. We all know it. We see so many people hop out of the car. The champion jumps out of the cockpit. He's got it on. Here's some tests we conducted at Wayne State. It's a 53G crash at 35-mile-an-hour velocity change. Doesn't sound much, but we'll see. It's got the Thor dummy, which is a much more flexible dummy than the traditional crash test dummy. And first test, no head neck restraint. Second one, Hans. Here we go. He's basically looking backwards at the end of this test, okay? Because this is more severe than that volunteer you saw. Here we are with the Hans. You see it lock up, hold the head, bingo, no problem. But you see how far forward we went at 53 Gs. So you do move forward in crashes.
Did the helmet deform there?
It might have a little bit. It might have, yeah, they do. They're flexible. Here's an example of the same thing happening. Hans working right there. You didn't see it quite, but his head locks up. There. You see it? His head didn't go very far forward, did it? There. There's a still from that. You see how far his head went? That's all. You want to keep all your body parts moving together. The Hutchins Hybrid and Hybrid Pro are also an option. Those are the only two devices that are approved by NASCAR for use. It's the Hans and the Hutchins Hybrid Pro. And I would recommend those are the only two you should consider. We look at them much more thoroughly than just looking at a test from SFI, which is it's a good test, but it doesn't weed out all sorts of strange inventions. Really the problem is that the Hans people have a wonderful patent that protects having the straps coming straight forward from the back. So all these guys have to come up at an angle and try to get something that works. And the Hybrid Pro does. But they don't work as good as straps straight ahead. Just like you shouldn't mount your shoulder belt down to keep you from going forward. So why do you think that straps that are coming up on an angle are going to keep your head from going forward? It's just a tough job for them. Like I say, there's really only one device, the hybrid devices, that manage that. What about neck collars? People wear neck collars in racing. They actually make your neck tension higher if you don't have a head neck restraint. It just slides up your head and adds its weight to the weight of your head and your neck. But you can use them if you put them underneath a Hans or a hybrid. You can do that. You can wear one of those foam collars with one of these head and neck restraints for the side-to-side bouncing if that's a bother for you, to ease your neck muscle strain. Okay, low-cost protection. A set of 16.5 belts, a 38-1 head neck restraint, and a low-cost aluminum seat with nets for somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000. You can have a system that will work pretty darn well in any situation. How many weeks can you afford to be out of work or, as Terry has pointed out, paying ER? Now, we talked about this earlier in the talk about fire. Getting out of the car. You should practice getting out with all your gear on all the time, every time. Here's Bill Elliott in practice at Daytona. Now watch. This is unusual. Most NASCAR drivers don't do this. He's gonna get out of the car. He's got everything on, Hans, helmet, the whole deal. Every time he got in and out of the car, he had all his equipment on, because that makes it second nature when you gotta get out fast. In fact, Le Mans requires that you can get out of the driver's side in 7 seconds and through the passenger's door in 9 seconds with these closed cars that they were running. Try that. Here, what you gotta do is practice. Because, as Terry said, you gotta know where you're going. And you gotta do it with your eyes closed. How fast can you get out the other side? Because the left side may be against the wall or something, and you can't get out. Practice, practice, practice. Now, in addition to your helmet, your head and neck restraint, other hardware, the flexibility of your driving suit may be a significant factor. So make sure you're wearing your driving suit, and maybe you want to get a very flexible driving suit to help you get out quicker. Practice, practice, practice. We've learned a lot from the IndyCar. We applied it to NASCAR. Here's an example of a success story. Okay, so here's a lot of rolling, about 13 strike downs. After a heavy 70-mile-per-hour Delta-V crash. This guy's big, he's 6'2", over 200 pounds. They helped him out, he's fine. He had 2-inch belts on. Everything worked. Okay, this is a famous crash, but we get some really interesting onboard here. So it's important. It's Danica at Daytona last year, not this year, and a heavy crash, right front corner, deadly direction. And this is the driver's eye view. Frightening thing to see as a driver. Safer barrier did its job, but this crash was more severe with the safer barrier than the ones that killed those drivers back in 2000 and 2000.
Watch your hands.
You know, watch what she does with her hands. Let go of the steering wheel. See how much it was? Very well controlled. Interestingly enough, that was a big comment. Oh, she took her hands off the steering wheel. She learned that from IndyCars because the kickback there is really severe. Will break your wrist. Jimmy Johnson in the race when he crashed did the same thing. He learned. He's a quick learner. He did the same darn thing that Danica did. Okay, and here's sort of exactly what we want to see when bad things happen. This is Paludo in the truck race. Another view of it here. You realize how severe this crash is. This is slowed down and a little more of an angle, better angle. You can see, man, really got whacked. Look at that car fly through the air. Rebound. And the safer barrier, again, was working hard on that one. It was what he had inside that saved his life. And they get some very, very hard crashes on these. There he is. That's what we want to see. And that's the stuff they had to replace in the safer barrier.
We have time for 2 or 3 questions, but I want to start with one. Okay. We have a lot of off-road people here today, and John, you talked a lot about IndyCar, NASCAR. You did show the off-road seat, but with these same principles, belts and seats and all this, pretty much hold true for off-road vehicles as well.
I believe so. The only issue is if you have a seat that can move up and down, then you need to have your belts attached to that seat. Now, the Hendrick seat that I show you a lot, the belt's attached to that seat, not to the old seat. So you have belts integrated into the seat so they go up and down with you, so your belts stay tight. As soon as you do that, you've got to have that seat, on whatever it's going up and down on, constructed strongly enough to take a crash. So I don't think anybody's doing that out there yet, but you're going to need some pretty strong supports for the seat to move up and down on, so if there is a crash sideways and forward, it stays in place. If they don't have one now, I'm sure you guys could develop them. If you develop the suspension systems that you run, which are amazing systems to run across the rough terrain like you do, you can do this too. So that's what you need. If you're moving up and down inside your belts, then in a crash, you're going to move in your belts and you're not going to get anything out of it.
John, why don't we get you to an off-road race?
Yeah, well,
Take a close look at all this.
it's critical to run everything right. We did give a talk to SCORE, how many years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. And they had the exemplar truck there, and as soon as I saw the belt mounting, I freaked. No, come on, you just don't tack them on with a tack weld and things like that. We're talking big forces here. In one of these seats, you know what the SFI standard is for the head? It's 2,000 pounds, and it can't deflect more than a ½ an inch. Shoulders, 3,000. Pelvis, 4,000 pounds. That's the kind of loads we're talking about here. Not tiny loads, we're talking tons. And if your structure holding what that system you bought together isn't up to that, you're going to be in trouble with the big one.
Just a quick comment. I know for the off-road folks, I see a fair number of referrals for swine crashes and off-road racers. Real simple solution that you can get in your car. 3 inches, 1.7 pound EPT foam, it'll stop. We've proven it, we know it. We were getting it in the Indy cars because they fly and land in the bottoms. It's a gone problem.
I think,
But it's, you got 3 inches.
I think that's what Chris Van Gilbert was probably using in his ISP seat too. With it, like I say, has been tested on a regular basis with the monster truck guys.
Yeah, Doctor, I was wanted to ask on a ratchet system seatbelt. Have you tested that?
No, and as far as I know, no ratchet manufacturers ever run a sled test. Our concern with them is whether they're crash worthy. In a crash, will they let loose? The last thing you want is loose belts. I don't know why you need a ratchet. The adjusters on a good set of belts work pretty easily, and you should have the adjuster in an area where you can easily pull it. Now, adjusters were a big deal after the Earnhardt crash. NASCAR banned lap belt adjusters on the left side because Earnhardt was pulling on that adjuster and pulled on an angle. And when you do that with an adjuster, you pull on an angle, you can get the belt twisted, and that bar on the adjuster will eat right through the belt under load. It almost cut the belt in half. It didn't, but it did come close in that test. One of the things at 16.5, when we started looking at belts, see, these belts came from military spec aircraft belts. That's where they came from. Military spec has a minimum edge radius requirement on all the hardware. That got lost somewhere, and the manufacturers ignored it. That adjuster bar that looks like a knurled rod, that was like a saw. They were not. It was like what you'd buy to grind metal. 16.5 has a minimum radius spec. Got rid of all that stuff. We were seeing belts almost cut with the hardware. No, not a good deal. So a 16.5 belt, you should be able to tighten it without needing any excess tightness. Belts don't have to cut your circulation off. They just need to fit your body well. And placing the anchors correctly and such, and having an easily adjustable point is the way to do it.
Okay. Let's, okay, one more question.
John, I know this question was asked last year. There really wasn't a clear answer on it, but why does NASCAR still refuse to use right side nets?
right side nets, it's up to the drivers. They feel what they have done is the rule is that the head support has to be even with the front of the helmet on the right side. Okay, and they feel that that is catching the drivers well enough. A driver can use them. Carl Edwards, my buddy, as long as he was running aluminum seat, he always ran a net. But we've seen the nets drop off because the experience is they're not getting around the seat. But you notice those seats are much further forward than what a lot of people use.
Thank you.
One question. What happened after a crash? What do you have to, when you have a crash, what do you do with your bed, what do you do with the seat?
Well, you send the belts and any of your equipment back to the manufacturer to have them evaluated. The helmet manufacturers will do that, the belt manufacturers will, the reputable ones that is, and the seat manufacturers, again, will check the seat out and say, oh, can't use this again, or okay, yeah, it's all right. Because you can't make that judgment yourself.